So, Vanessa, thanks so much for being with me.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, maybe this is a long question or a long answer, but I always like to start with why this topic, intimacy after addiction and trauma, means so much to
Mm.
you. Like, why is this? What is
Mm.
this something you're passionate about, in helping others?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I have both a personal and a professional investment here. So, like a lot of people who work in these fields, I have my own story. I'm a survivor of several forms of violence and trauma, including sexual assault and also institutional violence. And I have many, many years in the sex industries. So I've been in the adult industries as a sex worker also for a very long time, and also as an advocate and working with other people who work in the industries. So I would say my personal experiences have made it very clear to me that we need more. We need better conversations. We need more support. We need more culture change. Me Too was amazing, and it was just a drop in the bucket for a lot of us. So,
Mm,
we just need more work to be done so that we can return to our bodies, return to our relationships, and do that relational work that is so life sustaining. So that's my my personal investment, and then also over the years working with other women and trans and non-binary folks who survived trauma, and seeing where there's holes and gaps in the support networks that we have out there. um, my m- my investment in this topic is pretty broad.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it sounds like it's such a broad topic, right? Addiction, trauma, like there's so many different kinds of all of these things. So I don't know exactly how to ask you what are the holes that sort of show up for people? And I don't know if that's different if you're coming out of addiction versus trauma. Like I don't know how many pieces you want to break that answer into, but maybe you could talk about what this does to people and their own connection to their bodies and to sex.
Totally. So I'll just say I'm going to make some generalizations. There's always exceptions, but
Right.
in general, recovery spaces, 12-step programs, treatment facilities have a real hard time talking about sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And by the same token, in the sexuality field, sex educators, even sex therapists, sometimes really struggle to talk about addiction.
Right. Right.
And so we have this overlap for so many of us where we're struggling in both of these areas. And especially for women, statistically, trauma is kind of often at the root of it all. So maybe the therapy world is getting better at talking about trauma. Maybe the recovery world is starting to really acknowledge trauma as a foundation. But the issue of sexual recovery is still a really, really difficult and tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's so across the board. And then if you add in the fact that for queer people, the risks of violence from people we know and people we don't know is really
Mm-hmm.
high. The
Right.
risk of violence for cisgender women is mostly from people that they know. But the risk of violence for queer people is actually still very high with strangers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now we have a whole world of people who are experiencing different forms of trauma, who might be using substances to cope, or they might be living in a subculture where substances is just part of the deal. And we don't have a lot of support for working through those issues kind of in tandem. You're supposed to do one,
Yeah.
then the next, then the next. But that's not really how it works for most of us.
Right. Right. And so what kinds of issues are people experiencing? What might this look like? Like in my mind I can sort of imagine tie together violence and trauma and how that could be a
Yeah,
block. But like what have you seen in your work with people?
right. Um, so for people who've experienced sexual trauma or sexual violence, there's usually a migration to one end of a polarity. And what I mean by that is either total sexual shutdown, don't want to be touched, have a real difficult time connecting sexually. If they are in sexual partnership, they dissociate a lot or just, aren't present.
Yeah.
And the other end of the spectrum is out of control sexual behavior. So becoming sort of hypersexual, maybe having a lot of sex they don't really want to have, or you know, using the sexual piece of their relationship to generate any of the good feelings that are possible to have, and not necessarily feeling connected to that, right? So it's both of these areas of kind of intense behavior can be seen as a disconnection from
Yeah, right. Because it's
what
not
I
really about it,
actually
whether you're
want.
having sex or not. It's like how connected are they, right, to themselves, their experience,
Exactly.
the partner that they're with, or something.
Exactly. Another
Yeah.
thing that's really common is, even for people who don't have necessarily that kind of trauma, but let's say they've had a substance use issue. You come out of doing some initial recovery, maybe you got sober, or maybe you're just doing harm reduction or whatever, but you're like in a better place, right? And then you realize, I don't know how to date without alcohol. I don't know how to bridge the gap from enjoying somebody's company to getting in bed with them without my substances. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm scared to try.
Yeah.
That's also really common.
Yeah. I've had people
Yeah,
say, I don't even really know how to have sex without being intoxicated in some way. Like they've just never had sex that was sober. And it's like, I don't even know what to do.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so these may seem like really disparate, different experiences. And of course, in a lot of ways they are. They're very
Right.
different. Everyone's path is individual. But one thing that sort of remains at the core, from Dr. Covington's perspective and mine, is, and Dr. Covington's the co-author on this book about sexuality, just in case I need to say that.
Okay.
Um, we One of the things that we really see in our clients and the groups that we run, and and we've saw both of us in our own lives, was that the foundational issue is, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I like. I don't know how I feel. I don't know what my body looks like or feels like if I'm looking at it kindly. I don't know how it feels to be a sexual person, period, on my own.
Hmm.
And so that reconnection with the self, or maybe for some people, it's the first time they've
Right.
ever really tried to connect with themselves as a sexual being, and not just as a avatar for someone else's fantasy, right? But for
Yeah.
themselves. That's a very, very scary place for a lot of people, trauma or not.
Right. Right. Now, you mentioned sex work too. Is there a lot of overlap with either substance use or trauma? I mean, maybe, I don't know if you're going to have data for this or just from your own personal experience and the people you've interacted with. How much overlap is there in that world with the stuff you're talking about?
Mm, hmm. Um, so I'm careful about this because there's a lot of stigma, right? So one thing that I say is, yes, there is a lot of drug use in the world of sex work. That's just real. That's true. Where else there's a lot of drug use is law school.
Right,
So
right, right,
let's
right.
not be,
Yeah.
let's not get overly attached
Yes.
to this idea. But there is a lot of drug use in the world of sex work. That's just true. And there's also a lot of trauma, but not the way that we think. The stigma that we've been living under for all these years is that people who go into sex work are people who were abused as children, and
Uh,
that's always been part of the assumption in the story, starting with Freud.
right, right.
Um,
You wouldn't do this unless you'd been damaged somehow,
unless
right?
you've been
Yeah.
damaged or there was something wrong with you.
Right.
And we know that that's just not true.
Right.
Yes, there are lots of people in sex work who've had childhood trauma, because the sheer volume of women and queer people who've had childhood trauma is staggering. And
Exactly.
so some of them are going to end up in sex work, and we're going to see those numbers.
Right. Or they'll be in
Um,
law school and we'll see
or
those
or
numbers,
maybe
right?
they'll be in law school. But
Yeah.
it's, what we see mostly are the kinds of issues that are associated with poverty and with
Hmm.
needing money.
Yeah.
That's actually where you're going to see, sex workers have higher incidence of this or that. These are the things that you're going to see there, are things associated with people who need money now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes it's about domestic violence, because one of the main barriers to leaving an abusive partner is financial,
Right.
right? People get stuck in situations. So there is overlap. There is overlap. One of the reasons why, um, we had hoped to put some sex worker representation in the book is because, uh, many of the women who get caught up in the criminal justice system because of their addictions, sex work of some form or sexual exploitation is part of their story.
Mm.
A lot of people who have perfectly fine relationships with sex work who do it here and there, or like me, are kind of a lifer and have it as a perfectly fine place where they can bring money in when they need it. Still, when you're operating in that context, you are constantly faced with questions about sexual health and sexual desire and what it means to do things for sort of means to an end.
Yeah.
There's a way to have sex as a means to an end that you can survive perfectly fine. There's other times when you have sex as a means to an end and it can harm you.
Yeah.
And sex workers, I think, are people who are acutely aware of those differences.
Yeah. So in your work with people, and I guess were you interviewing people for the book? Is that how that worked? You were
We've done quite a few interviews over the years, and this book we worked with composites, so people who represent
right.
issues that we both have seen. They're based on real people, but there's they're like collages in
Right.
some
Right. Right.
way
Right.
of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, in talking to people and in your own work with people, do you find that there comes a time where they start to seek this healing and integration? Like, what gets them to start to seek something? Wait, I realize there's more. I want to do something differently, or something is about this is not working for me.
Yeah, I think it's again, I'm just making generalizations here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Right.
think but I think it's actually after people, if they're coming from the substance use side, it's after people have done a little bit of recovery and they feel like, okay, I'm starting to notice patterns. I'm starting to understand how some of these things have worked in my life. They've done some self-forgiveness. They've done some, they've done some work on their substance use, and then they notice that they have patterns in their relationships that are also sort of damaging, right? So maybe
Mm.
they partner with abusive people, or maybe they partner with people who also have substance use issues, or maybe they partner with people who are just emotionally unavailable all the time.
Right.
And the question about how do my relationships reflect my values and my self-worth? How do my relationships reflect these things? Those questions come up after a little bit of recovery. When it comes to people who are coming in more from the trauma side, and again, for a lot of people, it's both, right?
Yeah. Right.
But if someone's coming in more from the trauma side, usually there's a question that's existed all along, which is, how do I feel safe in my relationships? How do I connect with people in ways that don't cause me anxiety or shutdown? And so that question comes to the fore, you know, when you're not in the middle of a panic attack. So again, some of the symptoms have to be managed to a certain extent. Not
Yeah.
totally, not
Right. Right.
totally,
Right.
but you have to be in a place where you're noticing, like, oh, I have symptoms. That's what's happening. I'm having like real symptoms, and that means I can seek help. I can try new things. I can ask, my community to support me. Like all of those things have to be starting to emerge.
Right.
And then this question of, have I ever had sex I really liked? And have I ever been with somebody who really enjoyed me for me? Those questions start coming up at that time.
Yeah. When I hear you say those questions, I mean, I've heard these questions from clients so much. Plenty of them have had trauma, but some have had, I guess, what we call small T trauma. Like, I think
Right.
it's not that hard to end up as an adult with lack of connection to ourselves and to our desires and to our pleasure and to our bodies, and to be sitting there looking at these questions, right? It's not like we have to have had major trauma to
Absolutely
struggle.
not. No, you're so right. From my perspective, if you grew up in the United States, you have sexual issues to address.
Right,
Be-
right.
because we haven't had good comprehensive sex ed nationally since the 90s. We've had this patchwork bizarre situation where some people are getting really good sex ed and some people are getting absolutely none. We've got this extremely chaotic media environment that has sexualized everything but also doesn't actually talk about sex itself somehow. Like we have this very chaotic, very difficult landscape. And conversations about your own body and how you feel and what feels good to you, those conversations are happening in the sexuality spaces,
Hmm.
but they're not happening as easily outside of sexuality spaces where you've got the sex counselors and the sex educators and people who are really, in that material.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a ton of people who, even if they've never had a capital T trauma, even if they've just been in this culture trying to
Right.
navigate, there's still questions about how do I connect with myself and how do I connect with other people in ways that are satisfying, that are, equitable, that are mutual, that continue to create intimacy. What does intimacy even feel like? How would I know if I was
Yeah.
having it? Right? Those kinds of questions.
Right. So how do you answer some of those questions? Like what's the sort of overall, and again, I know it's generalizations, but what's the sort of roadmap where somebody goes from maybe no experience that's been like that? How do they end up there?
Yeah. So the book Awaken Your Sexuality, a guide to connection and intimacy after addiction and trauma, it's organized so that the path to self-awareness and the path to connection with other people is balanced throughout. So um, there's this concept in Dr. Covington's work of recovery being your inner world, your inner journey, plus your outer journey. The inner journey is your beliefs, your values, your feelings, your memories. Your outer journey is your behaviors, your relationships, and you are getting those things in alignment. And that takes effort. You have to identify these things. You have to be able to speak them to yourself. You have to be willing to take a look at maybe the negative ways you've been speaking to yourself or the negative messages you've been living in. You have to be able to take a look at your socialization. Where do I come from?
Hmm.
What did my family of origin or my caregivers teach me and tell me
Right.
about how to look at my own body? You have to kind of start at the beginning in a way.
Yeah.
But when you're willing to kind of take a look at your history, own your own behaviors, and also name the behaviors of other people, because sometimes trauma survivors take outsized responsibility for the behaviors of other people,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we have to get balanced about, okay, what did they do? What was their choice that they did? And what was my choice that I did? And
Hmm.
understanding that victimization involves a lot of complex dynamics, but we don't need to take responsibility for the choices other people made to harm us.
Right.
All of that sort of bringing things into consciousness, plus, because that all sounds hard, right?
Mm.
Plus, finding pleasures.
Yeah.
Starting small, starting with, we have an exercise in the book, in the workbook, that's about, it's not the classic five senses where you're just naming things to calm your anxiety.
Okay.
It's a five senses exercise where you take the time for 5 days, you focus on your sight, your smell, your taste, your touch, and you really sink into what pleases me.
Mm.
What am I enjoying that I'm seeing today? What am I not enjoying that I'm seeing today? If today is all about my sense of sight, what what is it bringing me?
Mm.
And you start bringing those things to consciousness and starting to find ways to incorporate more sensory pleasures in life. It doesn't immediately have to be go get your orgasms. It doesn't
Right.
have to
Right.
be that. And for a lot of people, that's impossible. It's like, no way, I can't, that's too much too fast, right? So we really encourage people to go at their own pace, skip around, this isn't,
Yeah. There's no
uh,
rush. Right.
there's
Yeah.
no rush, and it's not a chemistry experiment that'll blow up if you do it wrong. The worst thing that happens, I think, for the risk is triggering, right? The
Mm.
risk is I try to do too much too fast and I get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so there's several places where you can sort of stop and pause and think, okay, how am I doing with this? Am I interested and curious and feeling good, or am I feeling a little bit overwhelmed and like I need to take a break? And learning to understand those signals in your own body that are so important for sexual connection.
Yeah.
People push past the sense of overwhelm all the time, right? They
Yes.
just
Right.
blow right past it. I'm sure I'm fine.
Run
I'm
the
sure
red
I'm fine.
light, right? I'm just,
Mhm.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So as people are working to get more connected to pleasure, to their own, tuning into what their body is telling them and stuff, then what are some of the necessary skills when you're starting to interact with a sexual partner around negotiating or collaborating on an experience that is mutual and enjoyable?
Hmm. Yeah. Everyone's going to have their own unique connection that has different requirements. But fundamentally, you have to be able to talk about it. You have to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
If you're about to connect with someone new and you're too embarrassed to talk about sexual health, but you're not too embarrassed to have sex, pause,
There is a
rewind.
there was a guy I studied with who used to say, I mean, it was sort of aimed at teenagers, but even adults. It's like if you're not willing to have the lights on, maybe you shouldn't be having sex, like this. And it's a similar thing, right?
I mean, I think it's again, for some people, the body, the way that the noise of anxiety about the body overtakes them, okay, turn the lights out. But
Right, right.
be able to say to your partner, hey, I get real distracted my by my body shame.
Yeah.
Honestly, if
Yeah.
I have the lights on, I'm thinking about my body. And
Right.
I don't really want to do that. Can we try with the lights off? And then maybe next time you can give me some reassurances and we can try again. But
Yeah.
those are conversations. You have to be able to speak it. And
Right.
in order to speak it, you have to know it
Yeah.
internally.
Yeah.
You have to be able to sense like, oh, I don't like something. Let me pause, take a breath, tell the partner I need to figure something out. Maybe I do it alone, maybe I do it with them. The thing that I think is most difficult is slowing down because we fear disappointing someone. Maybe we fear their retaliation,
Mm.
right? If they're a good, wonderful partner, we fear disappointing them or we fear letting them down. If they're a bully, we might fear that they have a nasty response if we need to slow down, you know. So
Which is important
being
information to have too, right? If we're going to
mhm,
be willing to assess our partner's behavior and take that as important information.
mhm, mhm, yeah.
I
So
like that
it's
invitation. Like
difficult.
if you're not ready to talk to the person, maybe you should think twice about having sex with them, right? Like that's really important data.
It's interesting too because there's a lot of ways that people are sort of bypassing the difficult conversation online, right? So if you're hooking up with someone on an app and you've already texted back and forth about what your expectations are, what it is you want, how you want to do it, how long you're going to be there,
Yeah, yeah.
what your testing status is, what your expectations are for safe sex. You can do all of those negotiations, and some people are very comfortable just doing them real quick on an app and then hook up with the person. It's all very clear, and then boom, okay, fine. That can be a really satisfying and basically, adult sexual experience.
Right.
It's not necessarily the same thing as a sexual relationship or an intimate relationship. And when you want to build relationship with somebody over time, you do need to be able to do these things verbally, face to face. You have to be able to sit down across the table from each other and say, okay, here's something I'd really like to try. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's no, I don't have a leg to stand on to judge anybody anyway, but I'm not coming from judgment. People who hook up because they want to hook up, they're listening to their bodies.
Hmm.
They're not listening to their bodies. The question is, what am I going for? Do I need a hug and I want to get off because I think that's the way to get the affection I need?
Mm.
Or do I really want a sexual experience? And so I'm going to have a sexual experience. But that's another place where making those things really conscious can be difficult because
Yeah.
most people in this country have some touch deprivation, have some touch starvation. We're not an affectionate culture. We're very much about personal space, right? We've also made it really like difficult for people to have affectionate relationships with kids because
Right.
there's so much suspicion out there. We've made it difficult for men to have affection with other men because of all this stigma and shame. We just are full of ways to keep people physically separate.
Yeah.
And so many people, I think, need a massage or to be held or to be have their hair stroked,
Yeah.
and they end up seeking sex because that's the outlet that makes sense to them.
Well, the other thing I think people seek and use sex as a way to get it is validation.
Yeah,
A sense of
absolutely. Sure.
being important or valued or attractive or noticed or whatever it is, desired by somebody, and then end up having sex to fill that need too.
Sure. Yeah.
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 But
And that's
awareness
again
is
where
the key thing, right? Where am I actually coming from? And is this really the best thing to meet that need?
and also being able to live with your choices, you know. You're on your way over to the hookup house and you think, oh man, maybe this isn't the best choice. And then it's like, well, how can I stay safe and protect myself and be kind to myself? How can I walk through this now in a way that's right for me,
Yeah.
you know? And staying with that commitment to I'm going to care for myself no matter what.
Yeah.
I make a bad choice, oh, I'm going to take care of myself. I make a good choice, I'm going to take care of myself. I go into the same pattern I've always been in, ah, disappointing. I'm going to take care of myself. Right?
Yeah.
That foundational commitment has to be there.
Yeah.
No, it's a hard one to make.
Yeah. So you wrote a novel too, right?
Yeah.
Which I have not had the chance to read, but some sexy stuff in there. I'm curious, is there overlap in the themes between this professional book and work and what you portrayed in the novel?
Yeah, so there's definitely overlap in themes as far as the main character of my novel is a queer sex worker who's sort of finding her way in through her life. She suffers a big loss. Her dad goes missing, and she's trying to figure out how to handle it. But she's navigating what it means to be honest in her relationship, what it means to be clear about her own self and her own desires. She struggles with her mom. I'm not ruining the plot. These are all things you can read on the back of the book, by the way.
Okay,
But
good.
like,
So no spoilers. Yeah,
there's
right.
no spoilers here. You kind of know the arc going in some ways. But she loses her mom young, and she has some substance use issues and a lot of trouble connecting with people and relating to people. So yeah, there's definitely overlap in the themes and the substance of that novel, and the nonfiction book that just came out. I think there's a these are just like fundamental themes, not only of my own life experience, but of what I've researched and what I
Yeah,
encounter with my clients and my groups that I lead. So it's yeah, the question of how do I save my own life and how do I connect with other humans such that life stays worth living?
yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that even answers the next question on my mind, which is what if you could sum up what you wish for the world, from your work and in general, like what's the vision you've got?
Ooh. Well,
You
oh,
don't
I
have to
could
have like
talk
the
for so. I'm
perfect
like,
answer
I'm
either.
like, oh,
Just
I
like
could go. I'm just trying. I just had a bottleneck in the brain, is what happened. I I want people to have connection with other humans as their reason to live,
yeah,
right? As their to have community connections, friendships, family connections, intercommunal connections with folks that maybe don't look like you or don't live like you, to have connections that are romantic and sexy, and also connections that are extremely comfortable and platonic. I want relationships to be at the core of people's values. That's the big vision
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Because I truly believe that isolation and shame and stigma are the killers,
yeah,
and they are what create violence. Like that's
yeah,
that's that's where cycles of violence
and
occur.
addiction and
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so, we're living in this truly terrifying political moment in this country where you can see the polarization, you can see the value differences. And one of the things that I think is most painful for people right now who are struggling with trauma and struggling with addiction is that the idea that you are never supposed to struggle and you're always supposed to be winning is out there. Like
Yeah.
that's part of the political sphere now, that that struggle makes you useless, or
Mm.
struggle makes you a drain, or it's, I mean, it's ableist stuff about
Right.
how
Right.
human, you're supposed to always just be like, I don't know, healthy and white and blonde and rich, and if you're not those things, you're a problem. So, you know, what's the vision? I mean, the vision is justice fundamentally, in a
Yeah.
way, right? The
Yeah.
vision
Yeah.
has justice at the core, but there's also a sense for me of, I work in service provision, and I work directly with clients, and I know that relational work is life-saving, and I know that we have communities that require protection and care, and that in order for us to have the energy to do those things, we have to be sane, we have to be calm, we have to be loving. And it's really hard to be those things if you're in the midst of your addiction or your trauma symptoms.
Right. Right.
So it is for me about support, and the foundational need for support that so many people in my communities have.
Hmm.
And also the way that I have seen the people who have the least amount of support coming their way, that's the communities that build support networks the best,
Mm. Yeah.
right? So during COVID, who was constantly getting bootleg tests, getting food to their friends? Sex workers, trans folks, people who were not getting those government subsidies.
Hmm.
And so what do we do to create more opportunities for people to be in connection with each other, so that we can have more mutual aid, more resource sharing, more intercommunal activity, more respect for each other?
Yeah.
All
More
of those
joy,
things
more
are
pleasure, all this stuff. Right.
totally,
Yeah.
all of those things are related to sexuality to me,
Right.
because I want folks to feel comfortable in their own bodies. I want them to have relationships that sustain them. And I know that the pleasure of the body is a reason to live.
Yeah. I love that. But I'm also thinking a lot of the people that you're talking about have come out of, they've been in relationships where that has not been the nature of it. Like they've come out of relationships that were harmful, at least in
Yes.
some ways, so
Right.
they've learned that, oh, relationship is dangerous or other people are not safe or trustworthy. Right. And we're trying to move to the other end of the spectrum here too. All
Hmm.
the good you can get out of relating with other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm always so impressed. I'm constantly impressed by, the communities that I'm working in and living in and loving in, that the way that people just show up so hard for each other, even when they have relational trauma, even if they have childhood or family trauma, or even if they've had, domestic violence, or intimate partner violence. The way that people who have experienced some of the worst humans can do
Yeah.
still show up so hard for the
It's,
people that they love.
it's really amazing, actually.
I mean, it's the
Yeah.
model to me.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to be healed to be helpful.
Yeah.
You really
Yeah.
don't. Maybe you'll get triggered along the way, or you'll say something you don't mean, or you'll be messy. Okay. So is everyone. You don't have to like get your personal everything in order. It's just that it's your energy expands when you've been able to work through some of the issues.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have it all done. That's not a thing,
There is not done
honestly.
anyway, right?
There's there's no done,
Right.
you know.
All right. So say the name of the book again, and how do people reach you? What do you have to mention so people know more
Sure.
about you?
Yeah, thanks. So the book is called Awaken Your Sexuality: A Guide to Connection and Intimacy After Addiction and Trauma. It's co-authored with Dr. Stephanie Covington. It was published by Hazelden Press, just came out. And you can find it anywhere books are sold. I always guide people to Bookshop, which is the indie site, if we're going to do anti-Amazon activities. And we have a webinar for professionals coming up in November, November 12th. You can register for it at the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation website, or you can also get in touch with me. But it's a webinar for counselors, therapists, people working in treatment facilities, for how to work with the material, how to have conversations with your clients about sexuality that are supportive to them and
Qu-
boundaried and all that.
Question, since this
Mhm.
may come out after that date, would that be available
Oh,
again in the future or a replay or anything like that? Do you know?
yes.
Okay,
So that material, there's also a longer training for professionals that's happening in February
perfect.
2026. And that's through stephaniecovington.com. You can register there for that training on how to use these materials with clients. Um, the Awaken Your Sexuality book has a workbook. It's standalone workbook. You don't need to read the main text for the workbook to be useful. Workbook is chunky and lovely, and I love a workbook, so I'm very excited about that. And you can find me at Vanessa Carlisle, Carlisle.com. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a Substack newsletter called A Mouthful of Light.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.